It was a freezing December night in the rural parts of Vermont. I was alone in the house, watching my friend's dog, Chester, as a favor, even though the cold outside was brutal. I could not just let him out into the yard, since there were no fences around, and he could easily wander into the woods and never find his way back. Because of that, I had no choice but to take him for a walk in the cold. My friend had left me an old, dirty blue leash that was already torn in a few places. Chester looked thrilled when I clipped the leash onto his collar, and he immediately started dragging me toward the front door. Right away, I could tell he was going to be difficult to walk. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me hard and sent a shock through my body. All I wanted was to finish the walk as fast as I could. I jogged a little with Chester, just to warm myself up. He suddenly stopped to sniff one of the many trees lining the dirt road. I assumed he was about to do his business, but instead he lifted his head and stared deep into the woods. Then his loud, deep barking rang out through the trees as he pulled hard, trying to drag me off the road and into the forest. I did everything I could to hold him back, but the leash snapped at a weak spot and Chester bolted into the woods, vanishing within seconds. His barking echoed farther and farther away until I could not hear it anymore. I ran after him, yelling his name as loudly as I could. I figured he had taken off after a deer or some small animal, but with only my phone light to guide me, I knew I had no real chance of finding him. I had to hope he would come back on his own. After some time, I stopped moving and kept calling out for Chester. I heard footsteps close by and felt a rush of relief, thinking he was returning. But as the sound grew louder, I realized it was far too heavy, slow, and deliberate to belong to a dog. It sounded like 2 feet walking, not 4. I shut off my phone light, now fully convinced that what I was hearing belonged to another person. The footsteps sounded like they were moving around me in a slow circle. What terrified me most was not knowing whether it was on purpose, and whether I had already been noticed. I carefully began stepping back toward the road, moving as quietly as I could. I managed to put some distance between myself and the woods when the footsteps suddenly stopped, or maybe they slowly faded away. I honestly cannot remember which one happened. Because of that, I relaxed a bit and started walking faster. I did not realize that the dark shape ahead of me was actually the back of a person. I froze, feeling like my heart had completely stopped. I covered my mouth to keep from making any noise, but I knew deep down that it was already too late. Whoever it was had definitely heard me. In a moment of panic, I took a chance and asked if they had happened to see my dog. There was no response, and they did not turn around. They were wearing a hood, so I could not tell anything about their face or appearance. I made another risky decision and reached out to touch their shoulder, and once again felt my heart drop. The shoulder was stiff and rough, almost like wood. I stepped around in front of the figure that was facing a tree and saw that there was nothing inside the hood at all. There was only a long stick holding the clothing upright. It was not a person, but some kind of fake figure. That realization hit me hard. It meant whatever had been making those footsteps was still somewhere nearby. I stopped caring about being quiet and ran as fast as I could back to the road, then up the hill and all the way to the house. I never went back out looking for Chester, and he never returned to the house on his own. Telling my friend what happened was the worst part. He hated me afterward, which I expected, since we were not very close friends even before that night. Later that night, I had a nightmare where I was lying in my room and could hear Chester barking from the woods. They sounded scared and desperate, like whimpering cries. I woke up and stared out the window into the dark trees, hoping the barking was real and only echoed in my dream. It was not. Everything was quiet. I do not know what happened to Chester. I do not know why that fake figure was standing in the woods, and I do not know who was walking around me that night. Honestly, I am not sure I would want to know the truth anyway. One night, I agreed to watch my neighbor's dog for some extra cash. She was a strange neighbor, not in an obvious way, but she was older and had a very antisocial presence that made her uncomfortable to be around. She was extremely attached to her dog, so when she had to travel across the state to visit family and could not bring the dog with her, she nearly begged me to take care of it. When I finally agreed after settling on a price, she immediately started lecturing me about everything I should and should not do while watching her dog. The dog's name was Hazel. There was a lot of pressure placed on me because of how serious she was about Hazel. She demanded that I stay at her house instead of bringing the dog over to my place next door. She showed me the guest room where I would be sleeping, which had nothing in it except a single twin bed and a desk shoved into the corner. That was literally all the furniture in the room. Hazel was a small, fluffy white dog. I never found out the exact breed, but it looked something like a Bichon Frise. Despite her size, the dog was loud, constantly yapping, and incredibly annoying, and I could not stand it. I started watching her around 5 in the evening and spent hours on my phone, only feeding Hazel once that night. I kept reminding myself it was only for one night. I brought my Xbox over, planning to play games on the neighbor's television, but I quickly realized the TV was so outdated that it did not even have an HDMI port. That idea was ruined instantly. Most of the night was spent playing games on my phone, while Hazel barked at every tiny noise. I also did a bit of snooping around the house. I peeked into the woman's bedroom since the door was left open, even though she specifically told me not to go in there. The furniture inside was just as old as everything else, and there was a large rectangular rug in the center of the room with patterns that looked Indian in style. When nighttime finally came, I went to bed as early as I could, around 9. I assumed Hazel was sleeping somewhere in the woman's bedroom, and I did not really care where she was. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of Hazel barking nonstop. I yelled for her to shut up, but the barking sounded strange, almost muffled, like it was coming from a basement or something similar, even though I did not know of any basement in the house. I followed the sound, confused, until I realized it was coming from the woman's bedroom. I stepped into the room and noticed that the rug in the center had been rolled off to the side, revealing a door set into the floor that was standing open. It was completely dark below, but there was no doubt Hazel's barking was coming from down there. I was absolutely terrified. There was no way Hazel could have opened that door herself, which meant she was barking at something underneath the house. I was too scared to shine any light down into the opening, afraid of what I might see. I seriously considered running out of the house and straight back home, but I could not bring myself to leave Hazel trapped down there. I softly whispered her name, and the barking suddenly stopped. I waited, expecting to see her come rushing up from the dark opening at any second, but she never did. Instead, something else emerged from the darkness. A hand reached up and grabbed the edge of the opening. It was a man's hand. In that moment, I was faced with choosing between standing there or getting out as fast as possible, and being the 15-year-old kid I was, I ran. I burst into my house and woke my parents, yelling and explaining everything that had just happened. My dad immediately called the police and reported a break-in at the neighbor's house. Officers arrived and searched the bedroom exactly as I described it. They told us the rug was back in its original place and the door was closed. Even so, they opened it and checked underneath, finding a large crawlspace area filled with strange items scattered around. There was no sign of a person, and Hazel was nowhere to be found. When the neighbor came back the next day, my dad confronted her on my behalf. She apparently had a full meltdown and started ranting about demons making noise beneath her house at night. Then she broke down crying about her dog. From that day on, we never spoke to her again. We barely ever see her now. She almost never leaves her house. I am completely fine with that. Even now, thinking back on that night still scares me. There was a weekend when my aunt, uncle, and cousins went upstate for a short trip, and instead of bringing their dog with them or leaving her at a kennel, they asked if I could stay at their house and look after her. I was more than happy to agree, not only because they were paying me, but because they are very well off, and their house is packed with things to do. They own a Havanese, a very small dog. Her name was Luna. I did not mind taking care of her at all, because she was extremely calm and easy to care for. All I had to do was feed her twice a day and let her out into the backyard a few times. She followed me everywhere I went. If I was sitting in the huge living room watching television, she would lie on the floor in the middle of the room. If I went downstairs to the basement to play video games, she would trail behind me and settle down nearby. While I was playing video games in the basement, Luna suddenly raised her head and stared toward the boiler room. I had owned a dog before, so I knew they often reacted to the smallest noises, but it still made me pause the game and feel uneasy. I found myself staring toward the boiler room as well. It was dark and completely quiet in there, and there was no way I was going to walk inside. I turned the game back on and kept playing, though I was now uncomfortable. I figured my imagination was getting the best of me. She lowered her head again for a short while, but soon she lifted it once more and looked back toward the boiler room. Even though I knew it was probably nothing, I was too unsettled to keep playing, so I shut everything off and hurried upstairs, closing the door after Luna hopped up behind me. They also had another large gaming room on the main floor. That room was somewhat separated from the rest of the house, since you had to walk down a narrow hallway to reach it. Luna dropped down right in front of my feet in the small game room. I played video games for a bit longer, until it started getting late. I then walked down the hallway to the guest bedroom where I would be sleeping, which was nicer than my own room at home. I put on sweatpants and a white undershirt to sleep in, and climbed into bed, turning on the television, because I never fall asleep without watching something first. Luna was, of course, right by the bed. She had really grown on me with how gentle and affectionate she was. Eventually, I shut off the television and drifted off to sleep. Not long after, I was woken up by the sound of growling. I switched on the lamp next to the bed and saw Luna lying motionless on the floor, her head low, growling at something I could not see. I called her name several times, but she did not turn toward me. After a moment, she finally lifted her head and fixed her eyes on the closet door. Her growling became deeper and more aggressive as she stood up, still staring at the closet. She never barked, though. In fact, I never heard her bark at all. I followed her gaze to the closet, which had a wooden sliding door. The door was open by about 3 inches on the left side. From where I stood, I could not see anything inside. I slowly got out of bed as quietly as I could and crept toward the closet. I am not sure what I thought I was going to do. I think I just wanted to peek through the opening or listen for any noise. When I was about 5 feet away, something came into view through the narrow gap that I had not been able to see from the bed. I could not make out a face because it was too dark, but I knew exactly what I was seeing. There was a human eye, pressed perfectly between the wall and the edge of the door, staring into the room, now staring directly at me. I screamed, but it felt useless since no one else was there. I grabbed Luna and ran for the front door, snatching the emergency cell phone off the counter so I could call 911 while fleeing the house. It was 1 a.m, so I did not think to call my aunt and uncle. The police searched the house thoroughly and found a man hiding in the pantry closet downstairs. I never saw him because one of the officers kept talking to me to help calm my nerves. I was just grateful to step back inside afterward, knowing I was truly alone in the house. Aside from Luna, of course, who may have saved my life that night.